Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and today we have a special guest with us. Well, one is a returning guest. And listen, they have an amazing comic book that is Kickstarter out for right now, so definitely support it. And it is called Grave Brigade #2. Welcome back, Tim Radecki. Tim, welcome back.
Hey, Travis. How are you? Thanks for having me back. Appreciate it.
It's always a blast, man, to have you on. It was a fun interview the last time.
Yeah, man. I loved it.
And I also have the co-creator, Mike Dean. Mike, welcome to the Horror Realm.
Travis, thank you so much for having us.
It's a pleasure. Listen, I love horror and I love comics. So, guys, more than welcome to come on anytime. Now, listen, who would like to start off? Tell us a little bit about Grave Brigade, Grave Brigade #2.
That happens all the time. I think we should have come up with a better title. Everybody stumbles on that one. It's easier on print. Yeah, I'll tell you about Grave Brigade. So Grave Brigade is an action horror comic. The idea is when the Axis powers create monsters, we send our worst soldiers out to hunt them. So it's action horror. It's World War II, soldiers hunting monsters. So classic horror monsters, a lot of like the old Universal style monsters. There's vampires, werewolves, Frankenstein's monster, that sort of thing, with like really down and dirty soldiers.
Now, is it hard as a comic? I mean, doing a horror comic, is it hard to transition those horrific scenes into not animation, but into comic painting wise?
I think that we've gone back and forth for so long with this story that we just sort of came to a point where we both agreed that this was not something where we wanted to censor ourselves. So we're never being gratuitous for the sake of gratuity, but we also we're like, this is a horror comic. Like, we should be horrific at times.
I think also, coming from like a film background, like we do, you just have to rely on different things. So you can't have the classic jump scare. There's no music score to heighten the emotion of what's going on. So we really just have to build the tone through the art and the pacing. And a lot of that comes down to like how we collaborate with our artists, the line art and the colorist, and even the letterer to add the proper sound effects and that sort of thing.
Now, how important as a comic book creator to have that connection with the artist and for him to try to pass on what your vision is onto him?
I think everybody handles those kind of things differently, and even for us, with several projects out there, each art team is a little bit different. We work with collaborators in a different way, kind of depending on what they need. So Deb, who does all the line art on Grave Brigade, she's done all 5 issues for us. Really great to work with. She's very concise, doesn't need a lot of description. So we kind of just keep our descriptions to a minimal for her and let her build on it from there. And then if she has any questions, we're there to answer them. But for the most part, we just kind of lay it out like in a true script format for comics. And she presents it the way that she sees it. And then we can always adjust from there if we have any notes. Typically, the way we would work is we would do a layout page, which is kind of like a really rough sketch, almost like stick figures, but we can get an idea of the shape. She'll even draw in where like the balloons would be. We can kind of have an idea of where everything is going in that panel, and we can see the whole flow of the page. And we'll approve that or make any notes there. So it's before she gets into like inking the page and really gets into the serious details of it. So that way we can adjust anything we need to ahead of time. But for the most part, I think it's pretty minimal notes for us with her. And then same thing with Arthur, who's doing our colors. Arthur Hesley's been a collaborator with us for many years now. We really kind of like spend a lot of time in the pre-work when we're kind of designing what the books looks like. And then after that, he's really on his own. We give him some notes here or there, but for the most part, he's got it right away.
So this is a question for the both of you all. Right now, it seems like indie horror comics are making a huge resurgence. There's a lot of creators coming out. They put some good shit out there. Why do you think right now that resurgence is coming out?
Tim, I mean, you probably have a better theory than I do. You also keep up on kind of like other people's blogs and news and stuff like that. But the only thing I can really draw a correlation is that we're also experiencing a resurgence in horror films and horror as the genre has just gotten more life, pumped back into it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think on the like comic side specifically, like although it is like in the zeitgeist right now, like you're saying, and I feel like there's a lot of things in the world that's probably led us to needing that kind of release in a way. Comics specifically, I think it's been a couple things. There's been this emergence of new talent, and the ability to like get in touch with people globally is a really big part of it. So like Arthur lives in South America, our colorist. Deb lives in Italy, our artist. So we're able to connect with these people because of like the internet and social media, and have conversations through like Facebook Messenger, or, email and things like that, in ways that we probably never would have before. So I think that's a big part of it for the comics angle, is we're able to collaborate with people internationally. So that's made it maybe a little bit more affordable. So there's more people making comics, and I think that's a big part of it. And then once there's the need for indie comics for people that are desiring to make those indie comics, they're not going to step in the same places that the bigger comic companies are, DC and Marvel, where they're making superheroes. So I think everyone who's in the indie scene is going, okay, well, they're already doing that. I don't want to step on their toes or try to recreate that. I want to go somewhere where they're not going. And I think that's been horror for a lot of people. Westerns have kind of seen a little bit of a resurgence. There's a lot of mystery. There's noir, like all these other genres that are non-superhero in comics that have historically been a part of the comic industry since the infancy of it, back in the 1920s and 30s. We're doing all these comics, but I think horror is probably the biggest genre outside of the superheroes right now.
I totally agree. And because I mean, when it came to like graphic novels, like George Miller was huge. Like he definitely probably one of the greatest. And you start looking at The Walking Dead, and even like The Predator had his own graphic
Yeah,
novel series. So comics, I feel like people who like horror, they also like comics too. And I feel like it just goes hand in hand. And when you can put that both of those groups together, it's an amazing thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
immersive. Both are really immersive.
Now, one thing I don't understand, because I'm 42, there's a huge uptick of digital comics where there's a lot of people who like to read their comics on their tablet or on their phone. Like I am a physical copy comic guy. That's
Same.
how I go to the newsstand or the bookstore and get my comic. I like that. Now, have you seen more and more people buying your comics digitally?
Uh,
Yeah, especially internationally, I would say.
yeah, that's a big part of it for us. Shipping comics for our international customers, digital is the best way. And the same thing, like if I'm buying indie comics from an international person, or an international creator, it's easier to just get a digital because you don't have to pay for the shipping. That's going to cost $20, $25 to ship it, depending on where it's coming from. So that's been a big part of it for us. Like you, I prefer print. I've got a stack of comics right next to me here. I do buy international comics digitally just to cut down on that reason, but for the most part, I still stick to print, physical media. I like to touch it. I like to feel it. When my old eyes aren't working well, I can pull it up
Yeah.
close instead of having to hit the button to zoom in.
And one thing I love about comics is where they come out with a limited edition or a special edition series. Is that something that you guys are thinking about doing with your comics?
Tim, please. I feel like you could weigh in on this well.
Yeah. That's like a big part of what we do with Kickstarter. So there's always like a traditional, like for us, like we call it like the A cover. That's the one that everybody can get. That's the mass market one that we can sell in shops. But we always do exclusives on Kickstarter, so you can get a variant cover. We're also doing a black and white monster movie edition. It was a big hit for us when we did Great Brigade issue 1. A lot of our customers aren't necessarily the traditional comic book fan, but they want to get a copy of this. So we've done a full black and white version of our comic, which is normally a colored comic. We'll do a black and white version, so it kind of has a classic monster movie feel, like an old school movie. We do it in a hardcover, so that way it can sit on a shelf more than like a floppy would.
And that's something because, like, I do have, I've not been a comic collector my whole entire life. I love those special editions. I love those variant. Even when it comes to indie horror comics, I always get that variant. By the way, I'm going to be getting a variant copy of yours too, because
Awesome.
I like
That's
to have
awesome.
something that's different than what everyone else has.
Yeah, me too, man. Anytime I can see that in the store, I'll jump on it. Or when we go to cons, sometimes there'll be like a con exclusive. It's like that's the first one I want to get.
Now, you speak about cons. I go to a lot of horror cons. I go to a lot of comic cons. One thing, I mean, and I have one right here. I purchase a lot of horror comics, and
Nice.
one thing I love is for when the author autographs them, because to me that adds to, I'm not gonna say the value, but it adds to the experience. Is that something that have you had requests from fans like, "Hey, I would love to have mine autographed"?
Oh, it's a big thing in at cons. We always do. People will ask, which is great for us. It builds the ego a little bit to be signing a book, especially years ago when it was the first comic we had ever done. That was a really big thing. And now with our Kickstarters, we'll do a signed book plate, typically with that. So instead of signing the comic itself, because some people are purists, they don't want a signature. Some people that they love that extra touch. So instead of having to message people individually, do you want it signed? Do you not want it signed? Or making it a separate tier? We always include a signed book plate. It's a flat thing, so Mike and I can sign it. Currently, Mike is in Jersey. I live in Philly, so we don't even have to be together. We can send it to each other. We can cut together and sign these little book plates, and we'll have them. We usually mail those with our comics, so that way somebody does get the signature if they want it. It's a cool little print. It looks like one of the variant covers, but we also have it there for the purists who maybe don't want that signature.
By the way, go Birds! I'm an Eagles
Hell
fan.
yeah!
I don't know about
Good
Mike
season.
Lewis in Jersey, so I don't know if he's a Giants fan or not.
I'm not even a sports fan, so it works out fine. Go Birds.
Go Birds!
That's just how we say hello and goodbye here in Philly. Or
Yes.
Yeah.
thanks for holding the door for me. Everything's like a go Birds.
I lived in
100%.
Philly for 6-7 years, so I definitely am not opposed to the team. I definitely support the Philly.
Love it. All right, guys. So listen, you guys are horror fans. I'm gonna break it up a little bit, and I'm gonna ask both of you 3 horror questions. These are your personal opinions. Okay.
Love it.
Oh, man.
All right. The first question is: what horror movie series do you feel like is overrated, or franchises? To say.
I mean, I was gonna say Final Destination, and then I was like, I'm kind of dating myself there because I don't even know the last time there was one.
My gut was to say Saw, but I think the first one is actually pretty original. But I feel like as a franchise, I would say Saw. I think the ability for those guys to make an indie horror movie with like a super low budget, the way they did, and make millions off of it or billions at this point, I don't know wherever it's at, is pretty great. But as a franchise, I would say that 'cause to me, that's like gratuitous violence, and it's not necessarily like the sort of horror that I like.
Yeah, it became torture porn after
Yeah.
the first one.
And they were pumping them out like once a year at one point, and it was just overkill. It's like, okay, there's nothing new here. It's the same old story, just different victims.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. The second question: which horror movie villain do you feel like you relate to the most? I'm not saying you're out here fucking killing people, but you feel like you relate to.
Ooh, I like that.
Well, all right, I'm going to go a little bit of a deep cut here and see if you've seen this movie, Travis, but have you seen Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon?
That's not.
Oh my god, it's amazing. I'm going to go with that because basically the way that movie works is it's like a mockumentary about a supernatural killer making his debut. And so you're getting all of the like classic horror tropes that he's doing, but you're also getting him behind the scenes, and he's very like exuberant, and he's like psyched to do what he's doing, and it kind of reminds me of being like a creator or like a movie maker, where you get so giddy about like the project, but then when you're doing it, you're just in the zone and you're stone faced. I'm gonna go with that. Leslie Vernon.
That's a good one. I think maybe like the original Scream, maybe like the two guys in that, because they seem like they're just like average people that have stumbled into it. I don't see them being like as sinister as some of the classic horror villains or these slashers who don't really have much personality at all. Those guys are full of personalities. I feel like in a way that's more human and relatable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they're just two regular dudes.
They're just two regular dudes, and I could be a regular dude. First, I was like, Hannibal Lecter seems pretty relatable, comparing him to like Jason or Freddy, but I am far from a genius, and he seems like at least a genius. So the two regular dudes seem more like me.
You do like Chianti, though.
That's true. Some fava beans.
And this next one's not horror. Jean-Claude Van Damme or Steven Seagal?
Oh, Van Damme all the way.
Yeah. I'm gonna pick Van Damme. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I got him on the wall. Nice. Yes. All right. So I have a question. So when it comes to, this is a series. When do you determine, when you finish each comic book, where am I going to stop at, and where am I going to begin?
That's a great question. That's something that changes sometimes draft to draft, but we started Great Brigade probably around 10 years ago, and we went through different sort of like outlines for it, and then before we jumped into this series, this like set of 5 issues, we sort of decided what we wanted to get across in each issue, so that it had sort of a beginning, middle, end, to each story while still being part of a larger story. So really it just was a matter of, for this anyway, making sure that we were able to tell that beginning, middle, end, and also like hint at what comes next.
Now, do you gentlemen already have in mind the end all be all into the story, or is that something you're working towards?
Well, we started the art for all 5 issues of this miniseries. We've kind of seen this iteration of Great Brigade as a 5-issue arc, and we've done the art for that. We're just in the final scripting phases right now, and then sending it off to a letterer for the last little bit of that. But we do see the potential of doing 2 additional arcs. We kind of always saw it as a 3 arc series, but that's kind of like, all dependent on how well it's received, and if we feel like it's got legs to do more. We kind of wrote it in a way where we feel confident that we can end it in issue 5 and feel really good with that ending. That we give the audience what they need from it. They get their catharsis at the end. There's a full 3 arc feel to it, but there's also 2 more stories that we could do if we feel like there's an opportunity for that the audience is eager for that.
Do you guys actually pay attention to your audience? I mean, do you look at reviews? Do you listen to criticism?
I mean, definitely reviews and criticisms, but and also I'd say like directly speaking for the audience, especially, like there's been nothing better than when I tell somebody about a comic for the first time, and then they're like, "Oh, I wish I could like check that out." I'm like, "Oh, well, actually, I have a copy right here." And all of a sudden, like, they go quiet for 20 minutes while they read it, and then like give feedback. So absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's been really helpful for us when we're like pitching or you're submitting something. Sometimes when people ask questions, it points out like, "Oh, that's a glaring thing that we missed," or it might even be in the comic itself, but we didn't put it in our 1-page summary or things like that. So getting other feedback, getting people to review it and those kind of things is really helpful, because it helps us make sure that we are communicating what we intended originally.
And that's something that's so important that I feel like some creators don't realize. Like, you have to listen to your audience. You got to be open to feedback. You got to be thick-skinned, because like you have to give your audience what they want. You cannot just be stuck into the mindset that, okay, this is what I want, this is my vision. Sometimes your vision has to change compared to what your audience wants to see.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that goes both ways, though. That's like a line you have to sort of walk in a very careful way, because also you don't want to chase a trend. You don't want to, try to sell something to your audience that they've already seen. Like Tim and I also have had like an agreement over the years that like we're always going to try and make the comic that we would want to read, and just trust that we also are going to find that audience. And obviously, like you have to take notes and you have to take criticisms into account, but we also don't want to make something that people have already read.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think like there's something to be said about taking feedback and then trying to overcorrect, which happens sometimes. So kind of knowing what your through line is and what the guiding principle behind what you're doing is, and sticking true to that, because somebody may receive something negatively in issue 1, but they don't really know where the story's going, what's going to happen in issues 3, 4, and 5 maybe. So since we are the creators, we have that knowledge of where the story's going. Something that they pick up on might not be accurate, and again, it might go back to like, are we presenting it correctly? But to not go completely like a 180 on what we originally intended.
And that's so important because, as someone who reads a lot of indie horror, a lot of creators, get focused on the artwork, which is amazing, but they leave big gaps in the story. And like, especially if you're building a series, you have to do that character development. You have to make the audience care about those characters and want to see where they go. The art is great, but the story is so important.
Absolutely. I think story is number one. It's a visual medium, so art is definitely a really important thing, and that's what's going to maybe get somebody's eyes on your project, but what's going to keep them there for issue 2, issue 3, issue 4, issue 5, I think that's your story, that's your character building. So it comes down to the writers on that end.
And you gentlemen have also done film. When you guys are working on your comic series, do you ever think to yourself, what would this look like as a feature length or a short film?
We have thought about that before, and we actually, I believe we once pitched Grave Brigade as a feature length version at a convention, because there was some sort of like open call for scripts, and we just put it together. We're like, hey, that'd actually be cool. Let's just give it a shot. But when we're writing the actual comic, we always are writing it for that medium, and we don't, I think that's actually one of the biggest criticisms that we took was when we first started with our previous comic, Superbud. People would love it, but they always would seem to be like, okay, like you're building, like what's coming next. And so when we did Great Brigade, that was one of the things that we specifically wanted to be aware of, is the pacing and making sure that we weren't, backloading all of the story and not giving the reader enough, in the beginning.
And Tim?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it would translate. It would be interesting. I think the best adaptations are always something that are not a one-for-one. They really take the core part of the story, but make it its own thing. So I would love to see a Great Brigade feature one day. That'd be pretty cool, or it's a TV series. But when we're writing it, we are really just thinking about what is it like. Even like in that issue, we're obviously keeping the whole arc in mind, but really just like, what are these 24 pages? How do we make sure that we're hitting the character points, that we're hitting the plot, that it's engaging, that it's the right pace, those sort of things. So I think with Great Brigade, we are always trying to make sure that it's action and it's horror. We're trying to get a mix of both of those things, that the pacing's right. It's definitely like a dense book in 24 pages, but I think it reads fast, at least from the feedback we're getting from people, that it's a quick read, it's a fast read, it's fast paced, but we get a lot accomplished in 24 pages. There's a lot of scenes, there's a lot going on. So that's always our core tenet, is to make sure that we are just making the best single issue we can, one issue at a time, and hopefully when that comes together, you get the full story and you feel something after it.
Now, if I never read part 1 and I purchased part 2, would I be completely lost, or is it a standalone as well?
I wouldn't call it a standalone, but I also don't think you'd be completely lost. I think we do good, we make a point of reinforcing like what the story is. And I think that you could kind of jump into any issue and pick up on some things pretty quickly, partly because we use, certain types of archetypes for characters. I think a lot of people are familiar with like a typical World War II, little squadron of soldiers. And people are generally have an understanding of like the universal monsters that we call on. So I don't think there's anything where like you'd be completely oblivious, but it's very intentionally like a linear story.
Yeah, and I would also say, again, comparing to our first series that Mike was talking about before, Superbud is really here's the first 24 pages, and then the second issue comes out, and that picked up exactly where the last one left off. We intentionally wrote Grave Brigade to feel like each issue is its own unique thing, even though it's telling one larger story. There is one arc. So when you read all 5 issues, you'll clearly see that. But if you pick up issue 3, you could pick it up, and I think you get an idea of what's going on, because each issue has its own arc going on in it. And that was intentional. I think, when we first started doing these, it would take us a long time to make comics. It would be a couple of years between them. So when you're releasing a comic like that, if you only release one a year, we don't want to leave somebody hanging, going, okay, what's going on? So maybe in a good way, they're curious where the next one's coming from, but if they pick up that issue, they get a full story. They feel like a sense of satisfaction at the ending of that 24 pages.
Awesome. Now, where can everyone find you guys' work?
Well, right now on the Kickstarter is the best opportunity because everything that we've done is available as an add-on. So even if you didn't want to get, this issue of Great Brigade, you could just purchase add-ons and get stuff from our previous. But we're also in the process of setting up our e-commerce website right now, so that, because that's one of the critiques that we also need to listen to, is a lot of people tend to say, hey, I love your stuff, but when you don't have a Kickstarter, where can I find it? And while we are in a few local shops, we are, that's one of the things we have to embrace about, the internet time we live in now, that, it needs to be available to whoever wants it.
Awesome. Well, listen, down in the description, I have a link to the Kickstarter, so definitely click on and support this amazing comic book series. I know I will be.
Awesome.
Mike,
thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Listen, I always like supporting, especially comic, horror. Listen, you have me sold. All right. Listen, Tim, Mike, it's been a pleasure to have you guys on. Please go down to the description and support these amazing horror creators. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for coming to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce. That is Tim Radecki, and that's Mike Dean. We'll see you next time.
Travis, thanks so much for having us.
So, my friend, have a good one.